Hello everyone, I'm Irene from Associazione Culturale Comugna, and today we are going to talk about health equity, minority stress, and intersectionality. The reason we are going to do this is that because we want with this video to provide a framework that can be useful in reflecting with the students on the reasons and on the strategy that they decide to use for the activity Learning by Doing Students for Human Rights. Let's start from this concept, social gradient of health. I will read you this famous quote from Marmot. Social injustice is killing people on a grand scale, and the reduction of health inequities between and within countries is an ethical imperative. Marmot says that because there is this phenomenon called social gradient of health, for which it is demonstrated that individuals with a less advantaged socioeconomic position tend to have worse health and shorter lives compared to people who are more advantaged. This is a problem. Why? Because health has a huge impact on what people can achieve in their life, on their freedom, on their capabilities, and on their access to life opportunities. Health equity can be defined as variation in health status among different population groups, where these variations are systematic, socially produced, and unfair. In talking about health equities and minority groups, a very useful model is the minority stress model. What this model suggests is very simple. The idea behind this model is that when you are part of a minority group, you will experience a stigma, prejudice, and discrimination from the external environment and from inside you because you interiorize the stigma, which will lead to a more hostile and stressful social environment. And as we know from literature in psychology, stress is like a huge amount of stress is not positive for people's mental health if you don't have the tools to cope with it. This model was born initially because the researchers were trying to understand why people in the LGBTQI+ community were at major risk of mental health problems such as substance use disorders, depression, anxiety, and they attempted also suicide more. But even if this model is born in the context of the LGBTQI+ community, researchers believe that this model is useful in general to understand better the health of minority groups. Any minority groups, such as, for example, refugees, people with disability, different types. This is a version of the model which is a little bit more complex, and we're going to see together which are the elements important in this model. As a first thing, you can see in green that everyone, part of every human being in life, will experience some general stressors in their environment. And if the stress is very high, it might have a negative impact of people's mental health. What happens then with minority groups is that other than the general stressors that everyone experiences, they do also experience some stressors which are typical of people being part of that minority groups. And the thing is that these stressors, they also can be very small, but they are systematic and they accumulate through all the life, creating a possible big impact on people's mental health. We are going to start by seeing these first two types of stressors, the distal minority stress processes and the proximal minority stress processes. A distal minority stressor is a stressor that doesn't depend on the person's perception or evaluation. It's a stressor that it's very, it's happening in the environment externally. For example, verbal violence, physical violence, discrimination. For example, using the N-word to talk about a person of color. Like if you have a person of color and people call you in terms which are not respectful of your identity, this is an example of verbal violence. And for some people might believe it's a very small thing, but the thing is not that episode itself, but the fact that this keeps happening systematically through all the individual life. At this point, it becomes very stressful. And an interesting thing about distal minority stressors is that they can potentially be problematic not just for the people who identify themselves as a part of a minority group, but for the people who looks like they are part of a minority group. So let's make an example. If maybe I'm a cisgender heterosexual person, but because of how I express my gender identity, people believe I'm queer, and they might be aggressive with me verbally because of that. So this is to say that distal minority stressors are a problem in particular for the people who appear to be part of a minority group. Then there are the proximal minority stressors, which are actually impacting the people who identify themselves as a part of a minority group. And they connect to the experiences of stigma that are interiorized from the individual. Let's make some example. Expectation of prejudice events, rejection, and because of that being vigilant. So for example, if I'm in a relationship with a person from my same sex, because I'm a queer person and I have a homosexual relationship, maybe I'm okay with going hand in hand with my partner in public, and maybe nothing actually happens. Maybe the people around are cool with it and no one says anything. But what might happen is that I might have intrusive thoughts about how people might react. And I might feel that I need to be vigilant and constantly check if the people around are okay with the situation or not. And this fact itself can be very stressful, even if nothing happened in the external environment. Another example is internalization of negative societal attitudes. So, for example, a person with black skins might be socialized to believe that somehow white people are more deserving in life, and they might have a negative evaluation of themselves, which comes from the external society and the messages we receive from outside. And because of that, they might limitate themselves, their opportunities. They might believe they are not worthy of doing things, or that they are not able of doing things. And this can be considered as stressors, and of course is impacting their life opportunities. Another proximal minority stressor is the concealment of the minority identity. Okay, so let's say one person is a migrant, but they look physically similar to the people living in the country where they live. What might happen is that the person actively put an effort to be more similar to the people of that country, to not look like they are coming from a different country, and to make it hidden that they're migrants. Why does this happen? Because they might fear that some discrimination or some negative things will happen if they don't do so. But the thing here is that constantly having to hide your identity is very stressful itself. So maybe people ask you where you're from, and you do a paraphrases to try to avoid answering. This is just an example. The fact that you're trying to hide is a stressor. And is a stressor because what you're doing is trying to hide a part of yourself because you feel there might be negative consequences if you don't do so. You're not free. A part of your brain, there is a mental tax in your brain which constantly force you to spend more energies on being careful to all these aspects and things. An important factor in this model is a protective factor, which is resilience and social support. Likely, individuals are not just passive receiver of stressors, of stressful experiences, but they have skills themselves to cope with negative circumstances. So a strategies to promote minority groups' mental health might be working on these individual skills to cope with the stressors. Another thing that is very important, especially in the context of this project, is social support. Being in a welcoming and supportive community or in a supportive group is the protective factor for minority identities, for people with a minority identity. So for example, if you are part of a minority group which is very cohesive and there is solidarity among it, this is gonna protect your mental health. Or if you have a supportive family, this is gonna be a protective factor too. Or if in the place where you live, there are some spaces which are affirmative of your identity, this is also a protective factor. Last but not least, we need to remember that the reality is very complex, that people often belongs to more than one minority group. So it's very different, the experience of one person belonging to one minority group and from the experience of one person belonging to many minority groups, because it really much affects the stressors you get to encounter, and sometimes these factors interact with one another, creating bigger stressors. So let's make an example. Here there is a wheel of power where on the external side, there are the characteristics of people who are more at risk of marginalization. And in the inside, there are the characteristics of people who have more life opportunities. Of course, these things depends from the context where the person lives. But the important thing here is that they are all interconnected. So, for example, if I am let's say I'm a queer person, but I'm white. I speak English as a first language. I'm rich. I have a robust mental health with good coping mechanisms to handle stressors in my life, and I have a able body and a good education. This circumstance is very different from someone who is queer, maybe has dark skin, doesn't have document, doesn't have a house, and maybe is not neurotypical. These circumstances are very different because how the living condition and the discrimination interacts is a very important factor too. I hope that these concepts can be useful for reflecting with students about the concept of privilege and intersectionality, and to plan some activities that can be useful in reducing people minority stress, also by creating a more social supportive environment. Thank you very much.